So Nick Elion described the buccal plate in 2007, and he broke them down into three separate classifications: type 1, 2, and 3. Type 1, we have the buccal plate. It's even with the lingual or palatal portion. Type 2, where the bone has receded on the buccal halfway down. So now it is below the palatal lingual portion. And type 3, which is where it's beyond that halfway point. It's about 25% of the bone remaining compared to the palatal lingual portion. And he recommended that we should only do immediate implants in the type 1 socket. I have a different opinion where I think that you can regrow bone around type 2, but certainly not type 3. But that is my own opinion from some of the cases that I've done in my office. And they are much more difficult and require both hard and soft tissue grafting. So we're going to really stick to these type 1 cases for these immediate implants. So Joseph Kahn, he went a little bit further, because he started looking at it in 3 dimensions and saying it's not just the buccal plate aspect, but where the position of the previous tooth is. So if the tooth, the apex, is aiming more towards the buccal aspect, as it is in this case, then we have all this palatal bone available to be able to place an implant. Same thing here in this type 3 case, where it's going to the lingual or palatal, we can place the implant a little bit longer in the center of the bone here. So type 1, 2, and 3 were generally considered okay for immediate implants, but type 4, where we don't have enough buccal bone because it is resorbed completely around the roots, those are even more difficult to place and actually ever get an implant. These cases often, once extracted, require heavy amounts of GBR. So it's not just the Elion classification, but if we combine that together with the Joseph Kahn classifications, we can then decide when we should be placing immediate implants. So if we look at the amount of types of cases, most of the cases end up in this class 1 phenomenon. So it's seldom that we see these 2, 3, and 4, although they seem to pop up in my practice quite often. But you can see here that it's much more of the cases that end up in this class 1 phenomenon, which is really nice because remember, in the class 1, we have all this palatal bone. But what is quite difficult if we're going to place an immediate implant is preserving this buccal plate. That part gets very tricky. Yuri Grunder, when he was doing his analysis of cone beam on the buccal plate, and he found out that as we go more towards the coronal aspect, we have less buccal bone. Well, that makes a lot of sense, since Joseph Kahn is telling us that most of the teeth are aimed and they angled towards the buccal. Then this E over here, the edge, is going to have less buccal bone. So we know we need 2 millimeters of buccal bone. And if we take out this tooth, we may break this buccal plate. So it could be quite difficult to be able to place an immediate implant, especially when you have a fractured buccal plate. So being able to diagnose these cases is very, very important. Of course, we're going to have more bone at the apex because we're already past the end of the tooth, and we'll have about 2 millimeters of bone in that region. But typically, on the Joseph Kahn class 1 cases, we'll see 1 millimeter or less of bone.